Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for Atlanta Business Radio. Brought to you by OnPay. Built in Atlanta, OnPay is the top-rated payroll and HR software anywhere. Get 1 month free at onpay.com. Now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of Atlanta Business Radio, and this is going to be a good one. But before we get started, it's important to recognize our sponsor, OnPay. Without them, we could not be sharing these stories. Today on Atlanta Business Radio, we have Charlie Crawford with Hyperion Bank. Welcome, Charlie.
Good morning, Lee. Thank you for having me.
Well, before we get too far into things, can you educate our listeners about the difference between a community bank and one of those stadium banks, the mega banks?
Yeah. I don't have my name on that big stadium. Sure. To me, a community bank's a bit more of a philosophy than it is a certain entity. But most people consider a community bank a relatively small to medium-sized financial institution. We certainly are. We just have 30 employees, to give you an idea, with 2 locations, one in Philadelphia and one in Atlanta. So the community bank philosophy is that the bankers live and work in that community, know their customers and their market well.
And then what drew you to that kind of a business model?
So I've been in the banking industry for 35 years, and right out of college started at a really big mega bank, one that would have their name on a stadium. And every chance I've had in my career, I've moved down the food chain to smaller banks, and because I enjoyed being closer to the customer and the decision maker, and ultimately started a new bank in Atlanta back in 2006 in the community banking space.
And then how did that lead you to where you're at today?
Yeah, the connection, the bank I started was called Private Bank of Buckhead. And we opened in late 2006. And one of my investors in the bank, he reached out to me shortly thereafter and said, Charlie, you probably don't know it, but I'm an investor and on the board of another brand new bank. This one's in Philadelphia called Hyperion Bank. And both banks started at the end of 2006, about 3 weeks apart, coincidentally. And so he encouraged me to talk to their opening CEO and compare notes as we were both beginning new ventures, which I did. And we stayed in touch. And about 7 years into it, so we're in 2013, and this same investor reached out to me and he said, it looks like things are pretty going well in Atlanta. They're not going so well in Philadelphia. We have a new president. Why don't you talk to him? So I did. His name's Lou DeCesar, and he remains the president of Hyperion Bank today. And Lou and I had a nice conversation, and then time marched on, and we announced the sale of Private Bank of Buckhead towards the end of 2016. And this same investor reached out again and congratulated me, said it looks like a good outcome for the customers and employees and shareholders. And he asked if I would come up to Philadelphia and see if I could provide assistance or guidance to Hyperion Bank, which I went up for several months and did some due diligence. And I'm wired as an entrepreneur, so I had planned to stay with the big bank that acquired us, but my entrepreneurial juices got flowing. And so almost 4 years ago, I formally got involved and made an investment in Hyperion Bank and became part of the leadership team back in the summer of 2017.
And then from the customer standpoint, what should they be thinking if they're going to choose a bank to do their personal and business banking? Why don't more of them choose community banks? I know a lot of them do, but a lot of people just kind of go to these de facto mega stadium banks instead of considering, what's their fear of working with a community bank?
Yeah, it's interesting, Lee. The industry has continued to consolidate and shrink. So there are far fewer banks in general that exist today than when I started in the industry. We had over 18,000 banks. Today, we're down to about 5,000. But most of those 5,000 are community banks. Now, if you look at the demographics and population, to your point, a lot of people still remain with a large financial institution, either by choice or by acquisition. So to me, there's a nice place for both bank models to operate, in that what differentiates a bank like ours, frankly, the only thing is the people that we have that are assembled under the roof of Hyperion Bank, and the relationships that we develop with our clients is very personalized and customized. It's something it's harder to do when you're a large financial institution. So, it's not for everybody, but the clients that we have here at our bank, they've been clients of our bankers in most examples or cases for 25 or 30 years. So they tend to, they don't bank with the institution, they bank with the banker and develop a very personal relationship. If somebody's looking for a national platform with branches that look alike from state to state to state, then they'd be better with a mega bank.
But for most regular folks and small to mid-sized business owners, shouldn't they be working with a banker that knows them personally, that kind of can vouch for them? Because when there's times of trouble, like we just went through pandemic, having a relationship with a banker can mean the difference between getting that, PPP loan and not getting it.
That's well said, Lee. You're making my case. That's exactly why we started the bank back in 2006 as Private Bank of Buckhead. It's why we brought Hyperion Bank to Atlanta, because we've got a very meaningful relationship with our customers, and some of their requirements and needs don't fit inside a box, and they want to work. Frankly, we're so small with 30 employees. We're an entrepreneurial organization, so we understand the challenges and opportunities that a small, medium-sized business or an entrepreneur faces. Is the same ones that we are. So it helps and it resonates with the kind of business we do with our clients.
Now, how did you kind of handle launching the bank, in the midst of COVID?
Yeah, so what we did. When I got involved in Hyperion, I spent most of my time, the first couple of years in Philadelphia. We recapitalized the bank and we began to grow very nicely. And a lot of our investors that participated in our capital raise came from Atlanta. So those investors had asked, is there any chance that Hyperion could open a banking operation here in Georgia and Buckhead and Atlanta specifically? So we were able to do that, as you say, just a little bit before COVID. We, from a regulatory standpoint, had the approvals we needed from the Pennsylvania Department of Banking and the FDIC. And, our model is, the most important thing is our people, but probably second most is the technology that we use so that our customers can access all of their accounts and their services digitally if they so choose. And, we follow that with a very personal relationship. So COVID really just accelerated our model. We're not a big brick and mortar operation. We've got office space, but that office space, frankly, it's to give the employees a place to call home as opposed to expect the customers to have to come to do their banking business. So we did a significant technology upgrade last year in April, right in the middle of COVID, but I'm glad we did it because our customers continue to have access to all their needs electronically, and then the banker whenever that's appropriate.
So they're getting kind of the best of both worlds. They're getting access to, they're getting service when they need it, how they need it in the, out of their home if they'd like, as well as having someone to call if there is an issue and they need kind of personal service.
Yeah. So I like to say sort of our model is sort of high touch, high tech, and we continue to invest and roll out new technologies. You've got to make sure that that's just sort of the price of admission in the banking industry these days, that you're offering all the technology and digital services. But to me, the real differentiators then when you do need something customized or a quicker response or somebody nimble, that our bankers are ready to deliver that.
Right. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of having that relationship. If you're dealing with these mega banks, every time you call, you could be dealing with a new person. And every time you call, you got to re-educate them of your situation and what makes you different and special. Whereas when you have a relationship with a banker that you trust, that knows you personally over time, all of that goes away. They return your call or their team returns your call. You don't have to re-educate them and start from scratch every single time.
That's very true. And probably the best example of that in the last year with COVID was that your listeners are probably familiar with the PPP, the Payroll Protection Program offered by the SBA that our bank and most banks were very active in. But I can tell you, because we obtained a lot of new clients that were with the mega banks that were frustrated that they couldn't get anybody to help them or answer their questions or figure out where they stood in the queue of trying to access the PPP proceeds. And we follow the same rules, but when you're small, we can communicate with our clients, tell them where they are, and be able to push some things through that perhaps a large institution of small business may have gotten lost in the shuffle.
Now, talk a little bit about the mortgage program that you have now. That's relatively new?
Yes, we had mortgage capability and still do out of our Philadelphia office as a mortgage broker. But last year we decided to start a more of a full service mortgage company out of Atlanta. So it's called Hyperion Mortgage, and we got a dynamite lady, Carolyn Upshaw, that originates all the mortgages for our clients. And this time, the way we set up the model, we did a joint venture with a terrific institution called First Community Mortgage. They're out of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and I've known them for a long time. They do a lot of mortgage processing, and so what we did, we put a joint venture together where we brought sort of the client and the sales end of it, and they provide the back office functions for us in terms of underwriting and compliance. So we launched that just a little less than a year ago, last April, and our timing was fortunate. Interest rates have been extraordinarily low, really all rates, but including mortgage rates. So it's been a very fast-growing business line for us, both on new purchase mortgages as well as people taking advantage of refinancing their existing mortgage.
Is that primarily residential, or does it also go into commercial?
Yeah, what I just described was residential, but inside the bank, we do commercial mortgages as well for businesses that want to own their own building, for example, or an investor that wants to buy a income-producing piece of commercial real estate. So now,
what's your forecast looking into 2021? Are you pretty bullish? Are you seeing us kind of the pandemic waning and then, kind of business going back to business as usual, or are you kind of pessimistic? How do you feel right now about where we're at?
Well, I'm naturally an optimist, and I feel very, very good for our bank and for our customers. If you had told me in 2020 we'd have a pandemic and a recession, and it would be a record year for our bank with the highest growth and highest profitability, I would have been skeptical, but it was. And 21 is started very strong. We had a great January out of the chute, our most profitable month to date. And part of it is, the customers and clients that we're working with, certainly some have been impacted, and the PPP program I described, we're actively involved in what they call the second draw program, where companies that need it can take advantage of another SBA loan. So that's certainly assisted some. So, and I believe interest rates will stay low, so that's good for the customer and the borrower. For a bank, we'd probably like to see a rise in interest rates, but I don't see that on the horizon. And I think as people have become more and more aware and conservative with the masks and the social distancing, and we've got 33 million people vaccinated. I believe we're going to get through it, and we'll come out with a strong year in 21.
Now, can you share a story for our listeners that maybe illustrates the importance of building a relationship with the banker? I agree wholeheartedly that that's one of the key components of a successful business, is having that kind of a relationship. But maybe you have a specific story that you can share that can illustrate the importance of that. You don't have to name names, obviously, but maybe what their challenge was and how your team was able to help them.
Sure. Yeah, be glad to. One that comes to mind. We've got a company that they're based in Alpharetta, and this is a good example in that our private banker that works here at Hyperion, she has been their banker dating back to 2008. So, they followed her from our previous bank at Private Bank of Buckhead over to Hyperion Bank. And this is a company, I love what they do. Their primary business is they're a provider of art shows for children, for youth in schools. So they work with school districts and public schools and private schools, preschools, and they produce art shows. And they showcase the work by the students. And So they do everything from the original framing for the students and all the materials, the mat and the supplies, and they do everything in-house, which keeps their costs down low. And Lee, they've been profitable every year, dating back to when we started to develop the banking relationship up until last year. And so most of their revenue comes in the March-April timeframe. So that's, as everyone remembers, that's right when COVID hit extremely hard. And, it really was going to be devastating if we didn't work with them. So we were able to get them about a $600,000 PPP loan for working capital purposes. That now the way the program's going, that those proceeds will be forgiven. They've been able to pivot and move into a digital format for the art shows for the kids. We're doing a second PPP loan for them, and we also at the same time we're able to do an SBA, what they call a 7A working capital loan for about $1 million. So, it's fun now because I can see that they're coming out on the other side of it, and they're starting to ask whether they can prepay those loans faster because things are getting better. But that's to me a good example where our banker knew them very well, knew their history. They hit a bump in the road, and we were able to work with them and help them get to the other side on a successful basis.
Well, if there's somebody out there that wants to level up their banking and connect with somebody on your team or yourself, what is the website for Hyperion?
Our website's HyperionBank.com, and they're welcome. All of our bankers they're listed on our website with their email and phone number. Sometimes at a mega bank, it's hard to find the banker. I don't understand that. We put it right out there, so we'd be delighted to bring value to anybody who thinks so. We could do so. And
that's HyperionBank.com.
That's correct.
Well, Charlie, thank you so much for sharing your story today. You're doing important work, and we appreciate you.
Thanks so much, Lee. I enjoyed it.
All right, this is Lee Cantor. We will see you all next time on Atlanta Business Radio. And remember, this work could not be done without the support of our sponsor, OnPay. Please support them so we can continue to share these important stories.
Today's episode of Atlanta Business Radio is brought to you by OnPay. Built in Atlanta, OnPay is the top-rated payroll and HR software anywhere. Get 1 month free at onpay.com.